out there, y'all. Hey, I am back. I'm Paula, also known as Mama Berry. I am the author of Foundations of Spirituality, a guide for the highly energetic, vigorously animated, exuberantly bustling brain. And I'm the owner and operator of thatmamaberrylife.com. It's a spiritual learning community. You can find us on Facebook and you can check us out at thatmamaberrylife.com. There's also an intro video going more in depth about who I am and what I'm doing here. So if you're curious, you can check that out, okay? So, this is Astrology for Sovereignty. This is video number 8 on the angles and the aspects. As a quick review, we have talked about what astrology is in our past lessons, why we're learning it to use for our own sovereignty. We've learned about the zodiac wheel and the natal chart, and we discussed the planets, houses, and signs in detail. The last lesson we did in video 7, that hit on finding the focal points that we want to prioritize learning more about so that we can begin to dig into our natal chart. And we have the reference materials and instructions to help us get started defining those focal points. If you haven't written down your focal points just yet, you might want to go back to lesson 7 and finish that, okay? Where are we going this week? Well, this week, we are going to talk about angles and aspects. At this point, we understand that every component in astrology comes with a definition, a purpose, a reason to be. It comes with a directive on how it works and how it relates to other pieces of the pie. The natal chart is the script. It gives us our blueprint, our story. The planets are likened to the characters in a play, bringing about specific conditions in our lives that impact our body, our mind, our relationships. They can be main characters, supporting characters, or background actors, but they are in the play and they are doing something. The houses are like the scenes in the play. They rule over specific areas of life. Each scene in a play has to take place somewhere. Each house tells us where that place is, whether it's in the public eye, in the home, inside of relationships with self or others, or in the world of money and worth, so on and so forth. The signs are like the director. They offer structure and seasoning to each house or each scene. They give our houses, our scenes, the dynamics that allow them to come to life. As the director, they bring their vision, their version of seasoning to the scene, and they help everyone and everything inside of that scene work in cohesive alignment to express that vision whether they want to or not. So that's a brief review of our natal chart. From where we're standing right now and what we've already learned, we want to be able to understand that the planets, houses, and signs live in fixed positions in our natal chart. And those fixed positions inform how each component is able to express itself. Angles and aspects add the final foundational layer to that expression through a defined communication process. Because the natal chart, it does not just sit there and express itself from a fixed position. Its components speak to one another, and then they express as a whole through aspects, which establish directional relationships between the planets and points in our chart. And this part involves math, kinda, sorta. So stick with me because I don't know if I can do this more than once. I am not a math person. But first, what is an aspect? What is an angle? An angle is a specific number of degrees between any 2 points in the natal chart. Those angles form aspects depending on how far apart those degrees actually are. There are many different types of aspects. In our last lesson, we talked briefly about the conjunction, which can be a powerful focal point. The conjunction is an aspect formed when two planets are so close together in the natal chart that they blend and merge energies. That's the first aspect that we'll take a look at. Let me pull up a table with definitions and we'll take a look together. I'll be right back. Okay, and I'm back. Just a quick note before I get started. When you see me pop off to the side like this and I have something up on screen that I'm talking about, I'm looking down at my notes a lot. So I am here with you. I am paying attention. I'm hoping that you're paying attention to the middle of the screen and not me looking down at my notes. Eventually I'll figure out how to be better at that, but it is what it is for now. So here we have another handy dandy table that I have created. This table goes over the aspects, the type of connection, their function, and their description. So what we're going to do right now is take a look at the type of connection that is formed first, and then later on we're going to go back and review the function and description. So first up, what we have is the conjunction. The conjunction is any planet or point within a few degrees, very close to each other in the natal chart. Typically, they're in the same sign, not always. In our sample chart, the Sun and Mercury are conjunct. They are at 24 and 25 degrees of Gemini. So I'm going to pull that up as an example just so we can actually see it. So we're going to talk about it, talk it through, and then we're going to look at it, okay? This is our sample chart. This is our Sun right here, and you can see the Sun is marked as 24 degrees and 18 minutes of Gemini, right? This is Mercury. Mercury is at 25 degrees. These are very close together. They're 1 degree apart, a little bit more than 1 degree, but they're 1 degree apart. That's a conjunction. So an exact conjunction would be 0 degrees because they would be right on top of each other, right? That's an exact aspect of an angle. But most angles are not exact. They are within the orb of a degree. So this is not a 0 degree conjunction. It's a conjunction within 1 degree of each other. It's a very close conjunction. That's important. Now, we're going to talk about the sextile. The sextile is any planet or point in a 60 degree angle to one another. In our sample chart, we have Mercury sextile Saturn at 25 degrees in signs that are 60 degrees apart. What does that mean? So they're in Gemini and Leo. So we've got Mercury. We already know where Mercury is. It's at 25 degrees, 53 minutes in Gemini, right? Now, each house is 30 degrees, correct? So we know this is Gemini, and here comes Cancer, and here comes Leo. That means that from Gemini to Cancer is 30 degrees. From Cancer to Leo is 60 degrees, because that's another 30 degrees, right? Saturn's right here in Leo, 60 degrees away. And it happens to be at 25 degrees as well. It's almost exact. This is an almost exact aspect that it's making. Because Saturn is at 25 degrees, 51 minutes. Mercury is at 25 degrees, 53 minutes. Really close, right? If you look at each house as 30 degrees, it's pretty easy to count the number of degrees away any planet happens to be. So I'm going to move on to the next angle. And the next angle that we're going to talk about is the square. The square is any planet or point in a 90 degree angle to one another. So in our sample chart, if we take a look at Cancer, we're looking at Jupiter right here, which is at 12 degrees. And now we're going to bounce over 90 degrees. Leo, that's 30. Now we're going to Virgo, that's 60. Now we're going to Libra. Oh, that's 90. That means that any planet or point that's in the sign of Libra, that's close to any planet or point in the sign of Cancer in degree, is probably making the aspect of a square, because Cancer and Libra, those signs are square one another in the natal chart. Right here, we have Pluto at 13 degrees of Libra, and because Jupiter is at 12 degrees, that's a really close square, okay? So hopefully it's making sense. We're just going to keep on moving through so that you can see. or continue to see, the next aspect is a trine. The trine is any planet or point in a 120-degree angle to one another. In our sample chart, Jupiter, again, is trine Uranus. I keep on saying Uranus, and it really does not sound right. So we're going to say Uranus. Jupiter is trine Uranus at 12 degrees in signs that are 120 degrees apart. Those signs happen to be Cancer and Scorpio. So let's take a look over here at our sample chart. And we're going with our lovely Jupiter again, because Jupiter happens to be making a lot of aspects in this natal chart. Jupiter at 12 degrees of Cancer is trine, which is 120 degrees away. So we're going to count 120 degrees. From Cancer to Leo is 30. From Leo to Virgo is 30. That's 60. From Virgo to Libra is another 30. That's 90. And from Libra to Scorpio is another 30. That is 120 degrees altogether. So what is near 12 degrees in the sign of Scorpio? And that happens to be Uranus, 12 degrees, 50 minutes. Very, very close trine. So Jupiter and Uranus are talking to each other through that trine aspect. The last aspect we'll talk about is the opposition. The opposition is any planet or point that is in a 180-degree angle to one another. In our sample chart, we've got Uranus, and we're right here on Uranus already, and it's opposite Chiron at 12 and 8 degrees respectively. Now, Chiron is right here. And opposite is literally opposite. So we have one thing on one side, we have the opposite on the other side, right? So from Scorpio, if we go along this axis, the opposite sign is Taurus. Taurus and Scorpio are paired on the natal chart. Anything that's around 12 degrees in Taurus is going to be opposite Uranus. 8 degrees is kind of sort of close to 12 degrees. It's about 4 degrees away. So it's not an extremely strong aspect, but you could consider it opposite. There aren't a lot of opposites in this chart, actually. So that was the best one I could find. But that's what it looks like on the chart. I hope that that made sense. I hope that was a good kind of sample on how you figure out what kind of angles and aspects your planets are making to one another. You know, you literally just count. So remember that every sign is 30 degrees. So, you know, if you want to find a sextile that's 60 degrees, you count 60 degrees in either direction. Go 2 houses in either direction. If you want a square, you go 3 houses in either direction, right? So that's that. Okay, so now that we've had a visual tour of what our aspects and angles look like, let's talk about a few other important components, starting with orbs. You may have heard me use that word already, and this is what that means. When we say that planets are close together or within aspect to one another, what does that mean? How close together do they have to be? When are they no longer within aspect to one another? Well, that depends on the orb used by any given astrologer or astrology program. That's an important one. You might have an aspect that one astrology program pulls up that another one will not pull up, because whoever created that program decided that they wanted a tight orb of 2 degrees versus somebody else who wants a looser orb of 10 degrees. That makes a difference. That'll make much more sense as we move on. An orb is the difference between the exact angle of an aspect and the actual position of the planets involved in the aspect. It helps us define the strength of the aspect and the point where it is no longer within range of being an aspect at all anymore. For the conjunction, which is defined by 2 planets very close together, what that really means is that at some point, they can look close together in the natal chart, but be so far apart by degree that it's really not a conjunction anymore. We have a great example of this in the sample chart with Jupiter and Venus. Jupiter and Venus are both in the sign of Cancer. They're right here. Here's Jupiter, here's Venus. But Jupiter is at 12 degrees of Cancer, Jupiter 12, and Venus is at 29 degrees, Venus 29 degrees, right? When we do the math, they are 17 degrees apart, 17 degrees, and that number, that's the orb. It's the measure of distance between Jupiter and Venus and their exact locations in the chart. When we look at the definition of a conjunction, we no longer consider planets to be an aspect to one another if they are farther apart than about 10 degrees max. In this case, even though in the natal chart, Jupiter and Venus look like they're really close together. They're like boom, boom, boom. They're right there close together. They're not really forming a conjunction because in reality, their degrees are so far apart, we would not consider them to be conjunct. 17 degrees is too far apart. They are outside of the orb for the range that we are using to define a conjunction. The orb is an important way to determine whether the aspect exists, and if it does, how strong it is, and how much of an impact it will have on the native. Next, we actually spoke about angles in our last lesson, but they referred to something slightly different. The degrees on the cusps of the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses. These are considered angles in the natal chart. They correspond to the ascendant, the IC, the descendant, and the midheaven, and they are points in the chart, not planets, that, when activated, tend to coordinate with major life events like marriage, illness, meeting your spouse, having children, or career advancements. These angles, they're all 90 degrees away from one another inside of the natal chart, and they sit on houses that represent important aspects of ourselves. The first house right here, this is the ascendant. It is the first house of the self, and it represents physical manifestations of who we are and how we function. The energy in that house can impact our physical appearance and our health. The 4th house is right down here. That's our house of home and foundation. It is how we experience our early home environment, and it shapes our worldview. The 7th house, right over here, that is Aries in this chart. It's our house of intimate partnerships. It governs close partnerships and romantic connections that tend to form long-term bonds like marriage or business partnerships. They are defined by legal and binding contracts. These are not simply acquaintances. These are not simply run-of-the-mill relationships. Intimate, close relationships, often involving contracts of some kind. And marriage is a contract, and it's legal, and it's binding, which is why this is the house of intimate partnerships. Now we're going to pop up to the top of the chart, the 10th house. The 10th house is our house of career and public goals. It helps define our professional path, and it shapes how others see us in the public eye. It represents our leadership ability and how we wield authority in life. So these are our angles: the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th. Together, these angles represent the potential inherent in the most important pieces of our lives. When or if we marry, what type of career we are best suited to, what we look like, how we experience family. Also, when these angles are activated, they tend to bring major events to our doorstep: promotions, divorces, illnesses. At this point, you should see how important angles are in astrology, whether it's an angle made by one planet to another, or by one specific point in the chart to another point or planet. Angles are how the natal chart communicates. So we already saw examples of what each angle looks like in the actual natal chart, and I hope those were clear for you. We're going to define them further now using the table, our handy dandy angles and aspects table. We're going to focus more on the right side of the table. The conjunction is two planets or points within 10 degrees of one another. 10 degrees is a really wide orb. What you will often find when you're looking to read a natal chart or transits especially, you're looking for a much tighter orb. Sometimes as tight as 1 or 2 degrees. It depends on the planet involved. It depends on the speed of the planet involved. It depends on the angle involved. It depends on a lot of things. It also depends on the astrologer who is determining what the orb is that they're comfortable with, because everyone adds their own intuition into the reading. So one astrologer might see results and impacts with a 5-degree orb, another with a 10-degree orb, another might keep it tight just to keep things a little bit more simple, because you see astrology is a lot. So that was a little side note. We're going to go back to the conjunction. Within 0 to 10 degrees of one another, what does the conjunction do? How does it function? The energy of the conjunction merges and blends together planets or point. They act together almost as one. And again, that depends on how close they are inside of that orb. If it's an exact conjunction, 0 degrees, they're going to be one. If it is a wide conjunction at 8 degrees, well, they're going to influence each other, but not the same as the 0 or 1 or 2 degree orb, okay? So let's bounce over to the description. Planets and points that form a conjunction are energies that are united. They are blended, therefore they act together. The closer they are to a 0 degree separation in the conjunction, that's the orb again, the more subjective these combined energies are. They don't stand alone, and they have a difficult time truly acknowledging each other as distinct or separate. In effect, conjunctions can be a blind spot. When the sun is in close conjunction to Neptune, for example, others may note the distinction, but it can be hard for the native to distinguish between their sense of individuality and their spiritual, evasive, or roundabout nature. The native may just assume, naturally, that others are much the same way. In our sample chart, we have the sun conjunct Mercury. This aspect in astrology signifies a close blending of the conscious ego of the sun with the mental processes and communication, that's Mercury. Makes individuals intelligent, mentally active, often deeply identified with their ideas. Called a cazimi if it's within 17 minutes of the sun. This position grants profound, intuitive, and creative clarity. Next is the sextile. The sextile are planets in 60-degree angles to one another within a 10-degree orb. So basically, like we saw, they're 2 houses apart, right? 2 signs apart, because it's 30 degrees in each house. What does the sextile do? How does it function? It's friendly. It's a mild aspect. It's helpful. It's encouraging. Often, we're going to get to the trine next, I think. No, we're going to get to the trine after the square. But sextiles and trines are read similarly, because sextile is 60 degrees away and trine is twice that. It's 120 degrees away. The trine is more powerful than the sextile. The trine, you'll see what the trine is. The point is, a sextile is read almost exactly like a trine. There's a slight difference. Here we go. The sextile is often read quite like a trine, right? Although there's a distinction between the two aspects. Sextiles, like trines, point to some talent and ease, but sextiles have a little more oomph to them. Trines become so natural to people that they might have to be reminded of their own talents or tendencies. Sextiles are a little more overt to the native. They are the talents that people appreciate in themselves. They may be more inclined to notice and work on these talents. Sextiles are communicative and relationship-friendly aspects. They point to energies that are capable of being directive. Sextiles reveal the potential for intelligent use of the energies. What that really means is that with a sextile, you recognize more consciously than with a trine that you have this gift or this talent, and you will go and actively tap into it to use it when needed. In our sample chart, Mercury is exactly sextile Saturn. This brings discipline and organization to the mind and leads to a reliable, trustworthy person. You have exceptionally clear thinking, and you're skilled at creating, organizing, and executing plans. With a trine, these types of qualities would naturally and consistently express themselves, but with the sextile, they would be gifts and talents that the native recognizes consciously and actively calls upon when needed. Next up is the square. The square is any planet or point in a 90-degree angle to one another within a 10-degree orb, give or take. What does the square do? What's its function? The square is challenging. It is tense. It aggravates. It frustrates. It influences through action, and it's more of the action of friction. So it can be an irritating kind of action, right? Something you might not like, so you have to do something about it. The aspect of the square creates tension between the planets and points involved. Tension is necessary in order to stimulate action, but too much tension translates to stress. The planets involved in a square are acting at cross purposes. With squares, we may overdo and run into countless obstacles before we get it right. However, squares force us out of complacency and get the ball rolling. Squares are often more difficult when we are young, as these aspects force us to grow and learn. In our sample chart, we have Jupiter square Pluto. This creates a resourceful, ambitious individual who's always reaching for the next level. With this aspect, one needs to look out for becoming power hungry and falling into conflicts with authority. There is a need for balance between the dissatisfaction that can push you to expand and the necessary gratitude for smaller achievements and accomplishments. Okay, next up, the trine. The trine is any planet or point in a 120-degree angle to one another within a 10-degree orb, give or take. What is this function? The trine is harmonious, it is positive, it is helpful. It impacts the native in ways that offer ease to life. It is stronger than a sextile. So, the trine can offer benefits to the native in a similar way that Jupiter does, very expansive. However, while Jupiter expands, a trine removes obstacles. It's the type of benefit that is so natural to the native, they may not notice how easy they have it in relation to others because it's simply normal to them. They might not need to work as hard as others in certain areas of life, so when there are challenges in those areas, it can be much harder for them. Planets and trines support each other. Trines by nature are accepting. They allow us to accept others, accept ourselves, and situations. The talents that trines offer a native are so natural, they are almost unconscious. Often enough, natives don't truly appreciate the talents these trines offer them, and they may not try to develop them. However, these talents are second nature and completely natural. So, for example, if a man has Venus trine Neptune, he may be poetic, romantic, or artistic, and he may easily accept his romantic partner for who they are. Another man with Venus square Neptune may have similar qualities and may possess a strong desire to accept his partner blindly, but doing so is not as natural as the first man. He has to work on it and might come up against difficult situations where he feels duped or abused by his partners as a result of that acceptance. In our sample natal chart, we have Mercury trine the ascendant. This leads to a curious native who is quick-witted, intelligent, and an excellent communicator. Now, side trip here. The description of the trine talks about ease. It talks about talents, gifts that are so second nature to the person who holds them, they don't even notice them. It's like they are subconscious or unconscious, buried down deep within us, right? We're not actively using them. It's almost like we think this is just how life is for everybody, right? So we don't recognize sometimes that we have a gift or that we're very fortunate. And so we don't work in those areas because we don't have to. So if we do get presented with challenges in those areas where we might have a trine, it might be really difficult for us to work through it, right? A square, on the other hand, is almost always going to cause us tension. It is something that we live with from the time we're young. So it's a tension that we're used to. We're used to working hard to get over certain types of situations in our lives. And so when we look at the square, we want to say automatically, ooh, that's bad, right? And when we look at the trine, we want to say, ooh, that's good, right? But if something is too easy and you don't recognize it, you might miss an opportunity. If something is too easy and all of a sudden you're facing challenges, as an adult, you might not know what to do. If something, however, is an area of life where you've always experienced a challenge because you've got a square there, well, by the time you grow up, you know how to handle that, right? So also, trines remove obstacles. They're not necessarily offering you perfect ease all the time. They might bring tension simply by removing the obstacle, because if they are removing an obstacle between two what we call malefic planets, right? Mars and Saturn, right? Mars and Saturn together are not always happy. They can cause some serious missteps, especially accidents. You don't necessarily want them talking to each other without any kind of obstacle in between them. And if a trine exists there and removes all obstacles, then you have two greater malefics talking to one another with ease. And that might not be bringing happiness and joy to the native, right? So my point is, when we're looking at definitions in astrology, when we're looking at anything spiritual, and astrology is spiritual, we want to remain as detached as we can. We want to be as non-judgmental as we can, as objective as we can be, because just because the definition of something sounds pretty and happy, it doesn't mean that's how it's going to play out in the realities of this 3D world, okay? So now we're going to go to our last major aspect, which is the opposition. The opposition is a planet that's 180 degrees away from another planet or point within a 10-degree orb, give or take. The opposition is also challenging. It's confrontational. It causes the native to seek balance between opposites. And when we look at the description, it takes two as the expression. The opposition is created by dividing the circle by two. Therein lies the key to the meaning of this aspect, relationship. People with oppositions seek out others as if to mirror their own internal struggles. They learn about themselves through interactions with others. Very often, oppositions cause us to swing from one side to the other, and we can feel torn. Oppositions represent a state of divided loyalties. Inner discontent, uncertainty, and insecurity can be a result. While a square is urgent and courageous, an opposition is unsure and wavering. When we use our oppositions correctly, we are more willing to consider the other side, and we can be adept negotiators. Okay, so those, my friends, are the major aspects. There are others that we won't get into here, such as the parallel, the contraparallel, the unconjunct. There's a semi-sextile and a semi-square, and there are others. Those are not major aspects, but they can have an impact on the native. Their impact tends to be much more subtle, and sometimes they're so subtle you don't feel them or notice them at all. And they don't necessarily work as activators inside of our chart. So if we have a trine, that tends to activate something or make something happen, right? Make something come to life and manifest in our reality. If we have an inconjunct, though, we might not feel it at all. It might be some kind of stress or some kind of tension, but we'll notice the square much more than an inconjunct. More often than not, we want to start out with the basics and expand from there as we grow. For angles, we begin with the major 5 before we begin to dive into aspects that have a much more subtle expression. One last note. This lesson really highlights, again, why it's important not to hyper-focus on any one aspect or piece of the natal chart. The sun sign is important, but it means nothing if you don't know how its house and ruling planet impact its ability to function, or how it connects to or communicates with other components in your natal chart. Your sun sign can be so severely suppressed by its position and connections that the native may have an extremely hard time expressing the aspects their sun sign naturally carries. It may make their personality and core nature hard to pin down, and harder still for the native to know who they really are. And that is the end of Lesson 8. That's all I have for tonight on aspects and angles. Until next time, find your passion, connect to your soul, and go and get your whole life. All the love, peoples, all the love.